So thank you guys for coming. I very, very much appreciate it. This is a nice little crowd. I honestly wasn't sure how many people would be here tonight. Come on in. Find a seat. Take a load off. Yeah. There's an empty chair over there. Help yourself. Come on in. Come on in. A little cozy in here. How are you? Looking good. Good. How are you, sir? Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. All right, like I said, thank you guys all for coming. I am Brendan Kelly. I see a lot of familiar faces, but also some new people, many new people that I've yet to meet, and it's an honor to be able to meet you and spend some time with you here tonight. And I believe this is either our 14th or our 15th town hall. And we have been holding these town halls, these conversations, since the beginning of this campaign. As many of you know, I'm sure you've seen my big fat Irish head on television over and over and over again with these lovely commercials. Some of them are nice, some of them are not so nice, that's for sure. But either way, I'm sure at this point you have some familiarity with how important this race is and what's going on in the country. But perhaps what's more important than what's going on in the country, what's going on right here in Southern Illinois. And those are the things that are most important to people that are living here in the community, that I hear over and over again from people, the things that are a concern to them. And certainly one of those things is the future of Southern Illinois University. It is definitely at the heart of so many concerns that people have, particularly here in Carbondale and the communities around Carbondale, and what role your member of Congress can have in being part of the solution. Just very briefly, a little bit about myself. I am the state's attorney up in St. Clair County. I've been an elected prosecutor, the top guy up there for about 8 years. It's been an amazing experience to be able to fight for victims and for also to seek justice, not just lock people up and throw away the key, but try to help people and get them back on the right path, be tough but fair. And before that, I was an assistant prosecutor, so I've done everything from traffic court to the most serious murder case and everything in between. And it's been an amazing experience to do that. Before that, I served in the United States Navy. My family came to this area about 35 years ago because of Scott Air Force Base. Many people have come to Southern Illinois because of Scott Air Force Base. It's a huge employer, a huge part of the culture, a huge part of what Southern Illinois is about. But another big part of Southern Illinois has always been this university. It's always been SIU and the important role. Come on in. You know, you might sit on the floor. Okay. Indian style. You know what? You can take this chair. I'm not using it.
There's two in the back as well.
Yeah, there's a few back there too. Yeah, there's a few back there too.
We have one more person coming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Want to take that one? Yeah, go ahead. Take it.
You sure you don't want it?
Yeah, it might work. I hate sitting.
Yes.
There you go.
Thank you. Couldn't figure out the parking thing.
So, as we have done this campaign, we've done these town halls, and I think the best part about doing this, and the thing you get the most benefit from, for me as a candidate, someone who will hopefully be able to represent you. Oh, you broke it. We need new chairs at SIU. Need a better chair budget, apparently. It's another infrastructure project right there. Rebuild the chairs. All right, there you go. There you go. Good job. But it's been good for me to be able to do this because I've learned so much every time we have these town halls. And it's less about me sitting and talking at you over and over and over again about this issue or that issue and talking politics. You can, if you want to watch that, you just go home and pick whatever news channel you want to pick, and you'll hear either side of the controversies of the day. But it's been good for me to actually hear what people's thoughts are about a particular issue. And we don't have to limit it to this, but I think it is very important for us to talk about the future of Southern Illinois University, what role the federal government can play in that, and for me to hear less me talking at you and more from you about the concerns and thoughts and suggestions and ideas that you have. They don't have to be a Democratic idea or Republican idea or anything in between. Whatever might work, whatever might be helpful to the thing that people are concerned about. So So with that, let me go ahead and, yes, there's, I think there may be one more chair over there. And there's two back there. You want to sit in the peanut gallery, go ahead. So that, I think the best thing is for me to just take questions, and I'll do my best to answer them, or frankly, a lot of times I'll just hear what you got to say, and it'll be good for me to know what it is that's that I need to know. Yes, sir.
I thank you for your positive advertisement. I'm so sick of all the things that are negative. Now you tell us what you want and what we need, and that's great.
Good, thank you, I appreciate that. What else? Who here is from Southern Illinois University? Here works at SIU? Okay, good. Retired? Good, okay. Well, tell me what I need to know. Tell me what you think about the fact that enrollment is down, the fact that there's a lot of challenges for the university, how important it is to the economy here. What do I need to know? What can I do to be helpful? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I don't think that outsiders realize that as the size of the university went down, we can't sell our houses. Everything about the community is going down with it. I mean,
Right.
even incrementally.
And did you work here? Are you from?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me what's your name and a little bit about yourself.
Susan Raywald. I had a lot of jobs at the university.
Okay.
I taught in computer science, and then it got away from me,
So as the enrollment has gone down, what are your thoughts about? Why do you think that has happened? And what do you think, what role, if any, does the federal government
My
play?
husband worked in finance at the university, in accounting and so on. And one of his jobs was to take the money from the state, divide it, and send some to Edwardsville and some here. I mean, just do that kind of accounting work. Well, we've only been getting 40% of what we expected to get. And so you can't fund things, and you can't fund things that bring students to campus. You can't have a fun weekend where we, put on a big show for 40 students from Chicago. We don't have money. We used to do it, but we don't have money. And it just, we don't replace people. That's what happened to our College of Ag. I shouldn't speak for the College of Ag, but somebody died, somebody retired, somebody got a better job, and all of a sudden we didn't have an agronomy department at the College of Ag.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
What else? Yes, sir.
Ron Darnell, and my grandmother graduated from SIU Normal. I graduated from SIU. My wife graduated from SIU. Two of my three daughters graduated from SIU, and I've lived here all my life. I've seen a lot of good times at SIU, and now we're going through a tough time. I taught 33 years at Carbondale High School. One of the big advantages we have at the high school, or had, I'm now retired, was getting great diversity coming from the university town and seeing those people and being able to share with them, and everybody in the community benefited from it. I don't think we promote, or it has, and partly it's probably because of the budget, but we don't promote the great things here that Southern Illinois University has to offer. There's some great institutions, there's some great things going on in this university that a lot of people just don't know about. We need to self-promote, we need to get some funding into promotion. I think that's starting to be done now, but it's a great university. My grandmother taught in a one-room schoolhouse in the 40s, about a quarter mile from our house. And she graduated from SIU Normal before that teaching. So I hate to pay all on that. Bottom line is I go way back. You see it all from top to bottom. We don't want it to go down.
What role do you think the federal government might play has played in the decline? And what role could your member of Congress play in helping with the problem? Yes, ma'am.
You can go there first.
Where was it? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Debbie Gunter, and I'm from Mississippi. And I married him and came up here and taught for a year in the forestry school here.
That work out okay so far?
Oh, God, yes.
Good. All right.
Great guy.
Sounds great. Good. All right.
What amazed me coming from one of the poorest states in the country, I came from Mississippi State University, and coming to this campus, it was coming to a backward place. Our school at Mississippi State has new dormitories. They built, I think, 4 or 5 since the 7 years I've been gone. They've got new buildings all over campus, not just athletics, but they've also got new academic buildings. Everything looks beautiful on that campus, and part of it, they got a research park. They've got all kinds of new programs going on, and part of it is because Mississippi has always had really strong federal support because they've had very, very strong congressmen and senators. And we got money shoveled to us. Thank you, Illinois. Y'all gave more than you got. But, to me, that's the problem, the capital investment that Mississippi has received. And Mississippi State's not the only place. Ole Miss is the same and Southern is the same. So it's just a shock to me to come here and these dorms are nasty. And the laboratories are not well equipped. They had to tear down the glass, greenhouse because it would fall into pieces. I mean, it's just ridiculous, and I just think Mississippi, you know, if they can do it, I don't see why Illinois can't do it.
Illinois sends more dollars, federal taxes, than we get back.
Yes,
Absolutely.
That's
How do
definitely,
you stop
definitely
that?
true.
But I think as you, as congressmen, you know, you need to work with Tammy Duckworth and Durbin and shovel some money here. We're backwards. I mean, we're a neglected area.
Infrastructure and funding for capital development is a big deal. How many people work in the, may work in the science departments or anything related to sciences here?
My husband does.
You, sir? Tell me about yourself.
Well, I'm assistant professor in the Department of Linguistics. We're a field that's supported by the National Science Foundation. And I mean, we've seen the depletion of grant funding from the federal, from the federal government over the last few years. It's getting harder and harder
Yep.
to get funding for projects. And those types of projects are, you go back 10, 15 years, those are the types of projects that led into infrastructure. A faculty member would be on the leading edge of innovation, would apply for a federal grant, and that would also lead back into supporting the school, and that money is starting to dry up.
My opponent, Mr. Voss, is part of a group called the Republican Study Committee, which is looking at advocating major comcuts across the board, including cutting funds to the National Science Foundation and the National Institute of Health. And because of this huge deficit that they have blown because of this corrupt tax deal, they are using that as an excuse to push for further cuts, not just to the National Science Foundation and National Institute of Health, but also Social Security, Medicare, those things. So I think that's the opposite direction we need to be going. If we're gonna continue to hack away at the National Science Foundation and National Institute of Health, that's gonna just kill Southern Illinois University. Let me ask you, what are the languages they teach here?
We don't, the languages are taught by a different department, but we have Spanish, Japanese, German, Chinese, I'm probably misremembering.
ASL.
ASL, yeah, thank you, French. Those are the primary languages that are taught here.
Is anybody teaching Arabic?
We do not, we've attempted to have some Arabic programs, but we've had a hard time getting those going.
It's been some good efforts over the past few years to try to link the needs for defense-related languages, national security. Chinese is a good one. It's good to hear that they're teaching Chinese here. But there are opportunities that have not been taken advantage of here for funding to improve teaching of languages that are specifically needed through the defense budget. Not just through an education budget, not just through the National Science Foundation, but also through the defense budget. And I don't know that anybody here has taken advantage of that, or that we've had anybody push that as an angle, as a way to boost to Southern Illinois University. There's opportunities there with Russian, with Arabic, Chinese. I'm glad to hear they're teaching Chinese, because that's a major one. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Holly Hurlbert. I'm a professor in the history department. I can speak to the language thing. There are other people here who can speak to it as well. The disciplines that teach and embrace languages have been bastardized over a series of years. This is happening nationwide. It's not unique to SIU. The notion that the humanities is a waste of money. Unfortunately, foreign languages have been sucked down along with that. So I agree with you that one of the things we need to do is sort of refashion how we talk about those skills. Earlier, you asked about what the federal government can do, and I would say, working with our students, I've been here for 18 years, college is getting harder and harder to afford, and we have gone away from the idea that a public institution like this one has a responsibility to educate our youth, and now it is, thank you. And now it's largely about student debt. The cost of the university is rising, and we can have an argument about, where that money goes, but I think the larger argument is as we're getting fewer dollars from the state, there are fewer loan dollars available, so students are taking out unbelievable loan burdens. And the idea that you should graduate from a public institution with the amount of debt, I graduated from a public institution in the United States 20-some odd years ago with no debt. I think that's increasingly impossible, and I think that's absolutely something the federal government needs to tackle.
I agree. How many students here? There's good. I was very fortunate. I was very lucky that I went to Notre Dame undergrad, some sort of computer error. Somehow I got in there. But I was able to afford that because of a scholarship from Uncle Sam. I served in the United States Navy. I did Navy ROTC, and that was the only reason that my family at that time could even possibly afford for me to go to an institution as expensive as that is. And I still have law school loans. I went to, Uncle Sam didn't pay for that. I had to pay that myself, and that's still something that we as a family have to budget for, even at this point in our life. And I just paid a nice big tuition bill for my son who's going to a public university. It was a lot. It was a lot. But one of the reasons why it's gotten more and more expensive, which I think is it's absolutely amoral policy, is the fact that the federal government still makes a profit off of student loans. The federal government is making money off students who are just trying to better themselves. They're trying to be better citizens. They're trying to be contributors to the economy. They're trying to do something that we all should agree is something that we all want everybody to do, is get an education, be part of society, be a good citizen, add something to the overall quality of our country. Education, as we've all been taught, and my parents taught me, education is supposed to make life better. But what we are doing right now with that policy is making education something that makes life harder rather than easier. And to me, that's an easy step. You want to talk about how you increase enrollment, not just here, but every single university. There's no reason the federal government should be making a profit off of loans. Now, are there all kinds of different pathways that I'm very interested in learning more about as to how we can make more funding available, how we can reduce the cost of getting an education, and I think there's a million ideas about that. But to me, it's an obvious thing that we have to change immediately is stop the federal government from making a profit off of student loans. And that will reduce some of those costs. Yes, sir?
These are questions for you.
Yeah.
Two of them.
Yeah.
The first quick one. What committees can help fix that, and what committees smell good to you?
Yeah, I don't know that committees are the magical answer. That's kind of an insider processy type of thing that labor is something I'm really interested in, because education and labor have a lot to do with each other, and being able to train people for the right careers that are going to be productive. And that means thinking about our education process and how it affects the labor force, not just at the college level, but starting very early on in life. So I think some of the problems we deal with at the college level sometimes and later on in life, if you focus on early childhood education, and we need to think about that entire pathway, not just at the university level. So I'm not giving the committees too much thought. There'll be all kinds of fun moving and shaking in DC for what those committees are going to be. But to me, the number one issue that I would be focused on in Southern Illinois is making sure that we are matching the skills that are needed for people to be able to not just have a job, but a job that actually pays something that's decent. And that has a lot to do with education, not just at this level, but also at the junior college level and high school, grade school. I would like to see us get back to valuing work, like hard labor. There are some real skills that pay really, really well that we are underestimating the value of. College is good for a lot of people, but it's not good for everybody. I know we're talking about how we increase enrollment at SIU, but we have to acknowledge that that's not necessarily the pathway for everybody. And to the extent that we can build partnerships between SIU and businesses as well as organized labor to train people for those right skills and make it easier to transition from those type of maybe junior college training or high school training, and then maybe eventually to a university level. And it's hard to move between some of those things sometimes. At least that's what I've heard. I've heard that from students. I've heard that from people that are trying to get an education, that you may want to do part of your education and experience one place and then finish at a place like a four-year university, but it's difficult to transition sometimes. Yes, ma'am.
I think the unions and also the unions at SIU could get involved in helping like high schoolers get positioned
Yeah.
for, jobs, like either in the unions and just giving them a heads up as to how to get positioned, how they need to get ready to not make certain mistakes that would preclude them from either being in a union or being hired at SIU. I think, because they know how to get the employment. And I think that's shared.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of our unions, a lot of organized labor have very good training programs. They're very good apprenticeship programs. And there's not enough people taking advantage of that, and there's not enough of that, connecting that to some of the other challenges that we have. We kind of we ignore that. And I think, if you look at one of the reasons why the 12th Congressional District is one of the worst places in the United States for wage growth. There's some places that are a little bit of wage growth, and there's a lot of places about, if you're on Wall Street, you're making billions, but they were already doing that. But we haven't seen a lot of wage growth here in the heartland and here in this part of the country, and it's even worse here in Southern Illinois. Part of that is because of these continued attacks on organized labor. All these efforts to underline the power of organized labor, all these things like right to work that was luckily defeated over in Missouri, those things have been used to undermine organized labor. Again, the people that are in power now, including my opponent, who's part of the Republican Study Committee, which is advocating for disbanding the National Labor Relations Board. Now that doesn't sound like a very interesting, sexy topic, but if you don't have the National Labor Relations Board, there's no one to enforce labor laws. So they don't say, well, we want the labor laws, but we don't want anybody to enforce them. That's another way that they're attacking organized labor. They're advocating for a national right to work policy. Those people are pushing getting rid of prevailing wage, and that hurts organized labor, which again hurts Southern Illinois. Yes, sir.
I'm on the SIU Alumni Association board, and we just had one of our meetings this past weekend. And a lot of the problems is, for student enrollment is concerned, the university is on, I believe, a good path. With the death of our chancellor, that's obviously gonna hurt. But everybody that talked to us, every administrator that talked to us this past weekend, talked very positively about what's gonna happen in the next year, 2 and 3. We're gonna have another decrease in enrollment next year, by the way, because we got 4,500 graduates.
Right.
People are gonna be graduating. We had, 900 freshmen this year. If we even get 2,500 freshmen next year, we're still 2,000 short.
Right.
But, and like Ron Darnell said, my family, there's 12 SIU Carbondale degrees in my immediate family. This university is not only the driver of the educational system, the educational background, the cultural background. It is also, of course, as you know, the economic driver.
Yes.
Not just in Carbondale, but in all of Southern Illinois.
Marion, Carterville,
Absolutely. I see
everywhere.
some business managers and owners here who can attest to what's happened because of the enrollment drop. So, in answer to your question initially of what can you do at the congressional level, I think I don't have any immediate answers, but I think you have to stay in touch with the administrators and the faculty members that are working on federal grants, et cetera. They probably will know about more things that could happen than you will know as the congressman, because they work in that field every day. I would like to deviate just a second. Your opponent has one particularly odious, well, more than one, but anyhow, television commercial, where you are accused of doing plea bargaining for a sex offender, I think it was. I've never known of a state's attorney that didn't do plea bargaining, because of the cost and the efficacy of running your office. It has to be done, I understand that. You really have not responded to him on television about that commercial.
Well, then it means you're not seeing our commercials, I guess.
Pardon me?
Then maybe we need to air more of our commercials, because we definitely have repeatedly.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
anyhow, I just.
I'll send you the link.
Okay, I would like you to address that just very briefly
Sure.
this
Oh, yeah,
evening,
yeah.
because.
Well, in that particular, there's a number of cases that are mentioned, and this is just a classic kind of maneuver that you
Yes.
see. People that have spent 20 years in Springfield and have become creatures of Washington, like Mr. Boss, this is what they teach you: just lie.
Yeah.
Just lie. If you need to get reelected, say whatever you gotta say to get reelected.
Well, I'm not
Lie
sure
if
it
you
all
have to.
started with Mr. Boss, but.
Sure,
yes,
I'm not saying, he ain't the first, and unfortunately, he won't be the last, but it's just if you're a lifelong politician like he is, that's the trick of the trade, just lie and do whatever you gotta do to get elected. And unfortunately, in those particular cases, every single time, whatever case has been mentioned, we did exactly what the victim wanted us to do, every single time. Every single time.
Oh, okay.
Yep, every single time. But, let me ask you, you mentioned small businesses. Who here's a small business owner? Anybody? Small business? You are? Okay, anybody? That's right. So how dependent are you for your small business because of Carbondale?
I mean, I do, first of all, my name is Roy. I know you know. I do taxes, and a lot of my business is based on the students.
Yeah.
And young people.
So if SIUE SIUC, and
Yes.
if SIUE continues to take money from SIUC, and SIUC goes down, where's your customer base?
Right, because, the two largest employers that I've seen are SIU and SIH.
Right.
Now, with the decline in enrollment, I mean, it makes SIH suffer, and it makes other places suffer because you don't have the quality employment pool. And for me particularly, I've seen at my highest, I did probably around 500-600 clients, and now I'm down to about 150.
Because of the decline in
Yeah.
enrollment. Yeah. Anybody else a small business?
Back behind you,
How dependent are you on?
Very dependent.
Tell me
Not
why.
only are we dependent on people who are faculty here and administration, but also the students. If everybody knows, I manage the Furniture King. Every year in August, we have truckloads out in front of our store of mattresses that we sell to the students. They weren't full this year. I put them out there, but they weren't full. We didn't sell all of our sets either, but we knew that was gonna happen. So, and when you were talking about our property not being valuable and hard to sell, there's less people, less bodies, and homes still that need to be sold, and that's hard to do when you don't have the bodies that can move into them. So it's hard, and whatever we can do to
Let me
get
ask you,
back.
what are other things that might be important to increasing enrollment there? Yes, sir.
Yeah, much of our issues that we face and that other institutions face around the state.
Yeah, go ahead, if you wanna stand up,
Sure.
yeah, sure, if you can.
All right, so we need
Sure.
people
Yeah.
in order to have enrollment.
Right.
The university has been suffering from declining enrollment. This university is by no means alone in the state of Illinois.
Sure.
Suffering from declining enrollment because we've been suffering from declining population. So if you need more students, you need more people, which brings us around to immigration. For as long, in fact, since before this country existed, immigration has been what makes and drives America and American growth. If you have more people there, those people have children, those children grow up, they go off to college. When they come to college, particularly state colleges, it's very definitely one of the vehicles for further integrating people into American society. My own experience of this was doing graduate work in Chicago and teaching at UIC, where at least half of all the students had, just sort of a thumbnail sketch of who I saw in classes that I taught who were first generation children of immigrants, first people in their families typically who had a chance to go to college. Now a lot of them were going to USC because they also lived in Chicago, and one of the reasons we suffer here is that people need to come away to Southern Illinois, come away to Carbondale, Illinois to go to school. But we have this, that people view your opponent being among them, view immigration essentially as a problem, is really basically a bad attitude. Immigration is not a problem in this country. How we do it, how we manage the process is important. And, this is systemic. This is not the kind of thing that's going to cure all of our ills overnight. But we have fewer students because we have a smaller student age population in the state to draw upon in the first place. And if people aren't going to stay in Illinois and are migrating out of the state, and they are, the obvious solution to that is to bring people in. One thing I'm not aware of is the state having a problem with having too many people. Immigration for the state of Illinois is not, as far as I know, the problem. It is probably the solution. Now, on the federal level, that's very definitely something you have potential to work on, and where there's very definitely a need for something resembling leadership and a degree of courage.
Yeah, so how many, what do people think about in terms of the number of people that are coming to the university that may be coming from other countries to get their education here? How much of that is a factor in terms of enrollment?
I mean, our international enrollment has declined.
Is that because of the travel ban? I was wondering how that affected.
That has made it worse, but it's
That's
been
something you can do.
It's been, it's been more than that. And, some of it has to do with the climate, with what it is to be an international person in this country right now, which is, not a happy scenario. But this is a larger and longer problem at this university. We had a fabulous English as a second language program that brought in people by the hundreds, if not thousands, and it's been almost completely gutted. It is really hard to watch the university take things that make money and cut them without seeming to have a plan. The other thing I would say that I think the federal climate can do something about is this is not just about international students, it's not just about immigration, it's about making this campus as welcoming to everybody as we possibly can.
You gotta be careful, she's gonna be running against you soon.
There is zero danger. And I think some of that starts with one of the things, and I could make a laundry list here of things that I find incredibly depressing about reading the news every day, is how loud the drumbeat is about others in various forms. They can be LGBTQ others, they can be African American others, they can be immigrant others, they can be women. All of these people are being vilified by the current individual. And I, for one, would like to see the Democratic Party push back on that more. I recognize that's incredibly hard and incredibly vague, but I do think that SIU is a microcosm of our country, and that one thing that we need to do as a university community is figure out ways to be more welcoming to everybody.
Well, let me say this. Sure, absolutely. Let me say this. As someone in my job over the past, I don't know how long I've been, 12 years now, a prosecutor. I have seen how awful the flood of heroin and fentanyl is that comes into the country, and that does affect people. It's a real thing. So I think part of that is securing our borders and our airports and our seaports and the southern border to allow law enforcement and social service providers to get ahead of that. But last year, very early on when I was running, I went to a naturalization ceremony. It was a friend of mine, a young lady named Anna, who became an American citizen. And she told me how hard it was to go through that process, how screwed up it is, and how arbitrary and disorganized it was. And there's nothing wrong with us as a country making sure that we have people who to be a national security threat or some kind of public safety threat, that we are thoughtful about that, and we're taking care of our country and making sure our country's safe. But our system is a mess. It's broken. We don't distinguish now between somebody who may be a real problem and someone who just wants to come to this country and be part of the American dream. It's a disaster. And that is one of the things that feeds people's attitudes about this, the fact that it just doesn't work. They don't trust and believe that the system is working at all. And I think that one of the reasons that it hasn't gotten done, even though you have the people that are in power now that control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House, they all talk about immigration reform, but they haven't done a damn thing about it. And it's because of the flood of money into our political system. It has driven both parties to the extremes in some circumstances. It is difficult for people to be able to come to the middle, show some courage, and try to resolve this issue in a thoughtful way. Those things are not opposed to each other. Allowing people to be able to come here, to study here, to increase the student population, for people to come from other places, to be able to work at Southern Illinois Healthcare as well. Our immigration system and how broken it is hurting SIH as well. The ability to recruit doctors and nurses and other people that would be willing to come here and provide those healthcare services. People that are willing to come here and get an education from at SIU. So that system is completely broken. It is completely broken, and it is causing SIU to be hurt. I know that there's been a problem with people being willing to come here because they're worried about what's going to happen to them. There's a deep concern that they have, and that's something that has to be done. There's absolutely no excuse for the people that are there now. They control everything. They haven't fixed it. They've made it worse, and it is hurting SIU. But we also understand the underlying reason for it is because of the corruption of our democracy. Our country has been corrupted by the flood of money into our political system. We barely have something that resembles a democracy right now because of the flood of money into our democracy. So all these issues, whether it's the opioid crisis or education or immigration, we aren't going to be able to fix any of these things unless we confront that issue first. So that's one of the reasons why wherever I go, I talk about ending Citizens United. We have to pass a constitutional amendment. That's not the only thing we have to do to reform. We have to have more transparency in Congress. We have to have some very serious ethics reforms, and we have to have aggressive oversight of the executive, whether it's this president or any president. The Congress hasn't been doing a good job of overseeing and holding the executive accountable for 20 or 30 years. They keep passing the buck. They keep letting the executive do whatever it wants, and whether either party. It's not a good thing for our democracy. We have to have redistricting reform. These gerrymandered districts, which have helped the Democrats and Republicans, has not been good for our democracy. So those are, we have to get at the rot in our democracy if we're going to have a chance to fix any of these issues. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Been waiting patiently.
A geography instructor here, we teach how to use GIS so that you can have independent people doing the non-gerrymandering.
Right.
But I think one of the problems with enrollment at SIU is not just recruitment but retention, and that speaks to the K-12 education system and the lack of value of teachers, both in how much they're paid and how much they're respected. And the move, I think, discouraging the voucher systems and the funneling of money away from public schools into, so-called school choice that really is only choice for the wealthier people. More money in public education, because public education is going to be the students who come to SIU, to the state schools, and SIU is renowned for mostly many first-generation students coming here, and they're not prepared when they get here. And I teach, introductory level courses, and the range of preparedness is vast. And in order for SIU to succeed, we need to have better prepared students. And students deserve to be better prepared by the time they get out of high school. They should be able to do algebra and write. And so I think, sort of a cultural shift. I know obviously that's not something you as a single congressperson can do, but I think that's vitally important to the future of our whole country.
I agree. It's not if I get elected, when I get elected. I will be one of the few members of Congress to have served on a school board. The very first thing I ever ran for was a local school board, the place I went to grade school, where my wife went to grade school, where my two sons went to grade school. They had kind of an ugly teacher's strike and difficult budget issues, and some folks that were on either side of it said, "Hey, would you consider running? Because we have some real challenges." And I think they actually asked my wife first, and she said, "No, let him do it." She's smarter than me in that respect, that's for sure. So I ran and I was elected to the school board, and I saw how difficult the budgeting challenges that local school boards have. Some of it is a state issue. The way we fund schools in Illinois is, you've heard the term, I'm sure, geography is destiny sometimes. And what zip code you're in is determine what kind of education you're gonna get. Now, some progress, thankfully, actually has been made. Andy Menard is one person who worked on that. There's been some good legislation in Illinois to try to fix those funding problems based on property taxes and how much the state sends back here. So there's been a little bit of progress made on that. But we still have a tremendous problem in terms of equal education depending on where you're at. And to the extent that the federal government has a role in that, in terms of the quality of education, I think we have shifted a little bit away to actually teaching and more towards just preparing for a test. And we need standards, we need metrics, we need to know what we're getting for our tax dollar and whether or not our kids' educations are moving in the right direction. But a lot of our education system has shifted away from teaching kids not just the things that they need to know to be good citizens and to be productive citizens, but also have some character. Those are important things. We've shifted away from that to let's just make sure we have good test scores. And there's something that has been lost in that. I don't think we should have a one-size-fits-all approach. I do not believe in these efforts to gut public education. All that is going to make the problem of the haves and the have-nots worse. And I think one of the reasons our country is getting divided is because of a lack of common experiences. We talk about the greatest generation. They all had this grand national experience. They all went through the Great Depression, and they fought in a World War, beat the commies, and there was a lot of common experience. People had that common language. They had the common experience in their background. And I think public education is one of those things that helps bring the country together. It's another reason, I think, in terms of having more opportunities for students to be able to pay for their education, we need to increase the availability of national service. There should be some type of national service. It was a great experience for me to be able to serve in the military. My sister, she went to the Naval Academy. Her husband went to the Naval Academy, and that type of national experience where I was on a tiny ship with 50 guys from all over the country, African American, white, Hispanic, every type of background. We had some people who were from other countries that were trying to become American citizens by serving in the military. And that was a great experience that brings people together. We're missing those common bonds that make us Americans, that help us rise above what TV station we watch for news. We don't have that common thing before. And part of that is public education. So these efforts to sort of shift money so that rich people can just go to richer schools and the poor kids has got nothing. It is a dangerous thing, I think. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming tonight.
Absolutely.
Something I'm curious about, I hear a lot of, at these meetings, I hear a lot of why, but not enough how. And what I'm curious about in particular is, a lot of folks here are professors or retired or employed. And when I was a student, I went along. When I was a student here in '78 or '79, we had a peak of 28,000 students that year, most of the 25 or 30 for the city. So we're down to 12,000 students. Now, one of the things that's been apparent in the last few years is I'm wondering how much of this responsibility does the university and staffing have to take responsibility. We can't pin it all on the feds or the state, but it has to be a sort of a combined effort in that, like as an example, SEMO has several times the number of students that have come for specific needs in this area of the country. They've set up programs where we used to have that in Carterville, in certain types of trade programs and so forth. Have you dropped the ball in the last 7 years in really worrying and assessing about what the real needs of people in this area and attractive training, whether they be 2-year programs, and not to cut into Logan, but to sort of keep up, to negate, as an example, they would offer, they would not charge for out-of-state tuition, anybody can come. They had a lot of recruitment tools, so we've seen that decline. The question is what can we do and what can you do as a congressman to say, bring the focus back to SIU and achieve its responsibility of determining what its communities really need?
Well, I think we mentioned a couple things in making sure that there's not just a stable funding for National Science Foundation, National Institute, but it needs to be moving in the other direction. Because what they do is they say, oh, we're just gonna give you the same grant. But that doesn't adjust for the cost of being able to do that particular grant. I also think we talked a little bit about national service, but I do think there is other opportunities where we could, I think we should look at the possibility of reducing tuition, and people are going to not just come here and study, but they come here, they get their degree, and then they stay. And they stay in the local community. If they're gonna work at a local business, if they're going to start a local business, if they're gonna be working in a local municipality or a local nonprofit or local school or something along that, to be able to facilitate those type of ways of encouraging people to stay here. I think that is a big challenge, and I just some I don't know, but I'm open to ideas. Let me just ask you this: do you have a good federal partner right now, and you're a member of Congress?
I'd like to
Yes,
say
ma'am.
something. I think that when you get elected, it will be very important for you to use your ingenuity and genius and your commitment that you've demonstrated so far to see if you can get people to really, and this is maybe can't be done by legislation, but it has to be done by more creative ways, to talk about what it is that got those 28,000 students here that the gentleman referred to, and how you can get some of those students back, maybe 28 or 30,000 now, because there's some things that were done on the structure of the university that made the climate cold and frigid, made the administration indifferent, the way the university was administered. I was here part of that time. And so I believe that the commitment to actually have an enrollment that would be at home at SIU and be children of Southern Illinois and the Heartland, the doors got slapped in a lot of those people's faces. But I think they're not like iron doors or steel doors. They can be reopened. And
Well,
so,
I agree with you. Well, every university, every academic institution has to develop and foster its own culture. And that's something the students have to do, the faculty has to do, the administration has to do, and that's not something a member of Congress can necessarily tell you what to do, but can certainly help to the extent that they're willing to listen and listen about and ask them what way can they be helpful, and not be indifferent to it and just sort of, well, it's going down the tubes, what are you going to do? But be engaged and being part of the solution. Let me ask you, why do people love this place anyway? What attracted people here in the first place?
Parties.
Parties, okay, all right, good to know. Yes, ma'am.
Professors used to go to high schools and talk. In my class, 1968, when I came here, I know 5 people that had professors come to their different high schools and talk, and they came here for that reason. I know several professors now who have volunteered to do the same thing, and the people in the university have told them no.
Okay. I'm not sure much a congressman can do that, but why come here? What do you like about being here? I can tell you other reasons that I like this.
One of the issues is that we have a much different kind of recruitment structure than we would have had 40 or 50 years ago. There's more universities.
Sure.
They're competing harder for students, and high schools have responded to that. So I'm the associate dean in mass communication and media arts, and so I deal with some of the recruitment stuff from our end. And there's a lot of times where we have some idea we want to do this or that, and we go to the administration and say we want to do this. And they've been limited by the high school. You can only go here once. So if we can only go there once, they're not going to let one program go and take that one visit. They're going to make it a university visit. And so, in one sense, that limits the visits, obviously, but it also makes the visits much more diffuse, right? Because if you're interested in going to college, you're interested in some topic, or maybe a few different topics that you're sorting through. You're not thinking, ooh, do I want to go to SIU or do I want to go to Eastern? You're thinking, do I want to go to these places for this thing? And that's something that has become really difficult for us, and I would assume the other universities in Illinois as well, dealing with the Illinois high schools, that we can't do the kind of direct visits that we used to do. Instead, we have these college fairs and things like that that we can go to. But I mean, that's a lot different than going into a classroom and saying, you know, I am Professor so-and-so, here's what we do at SIU.
I'm kind of being professorial here, doing a little bit of Socratic method, sorry, but why come here? What's special? What is special about this place?
I came here because it was.
It's the most beautiful
it was accessible.
campus in Illinois.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
The school was accessible at one time, but the city is what the issue is now too with the accessibility. I came because state legislators told me that Carbondale, or SIU in particular, was very handicap accessible friendly.
Okay.
I got that from the, legislators in, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I came down here, and as soon as I moved out of the dorms and really dealt with Carbondale as a whole, I found it was like tale of two worlds, because Carbondale is not friendly. I can't go, I can't go to different places without having to schedule rides and transportation options. And if there is a transportation option, okay, that's number one. If there's a transportation option, you can't get around here.
Ma'am?
I was gonna say I came because there were success stories. So people who I met were successful, they came here and they graduated and got the degree. I don't hear many success stories. People are quitting for whatever reason. I can blame the university, I can blame government, but the success stories, and if you bring a youth here, they have to be supported and they have to be able to get through this process. And if you cut programs that support students in successfully achieving in academics, you won't get the good report. You won't get people saying, oh, I went to SIU and I was there 7 years and didn't do it. They're cutting
Thanks.
support programs.
So, I just got out of the van with 20 students who I've been touring. They're on this amazing journey called the River Project. They're from Augsburg University and the University of Minnesota. That university is letting them do all their studies on the river, looking at all these ecosystems. And I also work with the Washington University students I have for 3 years. They have environmental justice programs there. And from all the departments, kids from every department you can think of take those classes, social justice, environmental justice. I think you're shaking your head. And I see a lot of young students, these are the programs they're interested in. And to involve their studies, like their law, their medicine, into the environment, because they know that we're in the climate change right now, and we're looking at communities along our waterways now that are being completely destroyed. So their local politics are destroyed, their societies are destroyed, but we have no plan for resiliency. And so we need to mentor these students, create these programs at our university. That's what would attract people to SIU, because we have the environment to teach those classes right in our backyard.
What do you look for?
Well, I moved here with my parents from a state that has taken a lot of Illinois residents. We moved here from Nashville, Tennessee, and my parents are retiring here. And sadly, a response that I get when I tell people that is, why? But I think that I love Carbondale. I think it's beautiful. Nashville was just getting huge, busy, overwhelming. And I have made, while at SIU, I'm getting my master's in social work. I have made some really authentic relationships with professors, mentors. And one thing that drew me was, it made me think when you were talking about it, was a study abroad program in Munich. It was a global seminar, and it was 2 weeks where we learned about human rights from a European perspective. But what I loved about that was that it was only a couple weeks, so it fit in with the graduate school schedule. So that's what drew me here.
But you like it here?
I like it here, but I also see the issues. But yeah.
Am I just me, or is it just this is a beautiful place?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Southern Illinois is beautiful.
Yes.
I mean, who is? Yeah, the Shawnee to me is like the main reason to come here.
And the weather's nice.
That can't be the main reason why you come here. When I came down here in '76, I'm originally from Fort Wayne, Indiana. I went to Crew University. We had an extension branch up there. Came down here. SIU, the Department of Radio and Television, was third in the nation for hands-on. I came down here. I had a professor that taught at Purdue University at Fort Wayne. He told me about it, and I fell in love and came down and pretty flat up in northeast Indiana. And then when you come down here, you fall in love with the Shawnee.
It's beautiful.
Stay for the
It's amazing.
But that's it, we had great departments, and I just wonder, you know, is there a need for more reassessment, house cleaning, and sort of re-exploration?
But as you mentioned, it's a beautiful campus, but there's a lot of opportunities in terms of environmental studies, and you have this amazing resource in the Shawnee National Forest.
We need to evolve.
know,
It's time to
where-
evolve SIU.
I mean, Teddy Roosevelt used to go hunting here, you know, I mean, you have the Cache River. I spent, I don't know how many days, you know, hiking around here when I was in high school. This place is beautiful. People, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, people love that part of it. They want to be here because they like that part of the lifestyle. They like it. But does every student who may be looking for a university, they might like that, but what do they also want to be able to do? They want to be able to get to a major city, go see a major concert. They want to be able to go, maybe, you know, some people want to go see a major league, you know, baseball game or something, or they want to be able to get on a plane in an hour and fly to Costa Rica if they want to, because that's how mobile people are now. That's because there's, you know, there's no part of the world that's secret to anybody because of social media. You know, there's other things out there. So people like both. They like the feeling of being able to be in Southern Illinois. They like the Shawnee. They like the lifestyle of Carbondale. But they want to have access to the bigger world very quickly. And how long does it take to drive to St. Louis now?
2 hours.
2 hours. Right.
Yeah, so we've been talking about the 4-lane highway, St. Louis, connecting to 64 from Murfreesboro for the last 30 years. So that's a top priority for infrastructure. The other thing, you know, I'm a coal miner, so I'm a first generation graduate, 3-time graduate of this university, tenured professor at Missouri, came back here as an administrator. We have a small fledgling research park, which has not got the support that it needs. We need a venture capital fund for this district. For this whole district, we need to tie the urban end, which has got its problems, to the rural end and bring it all together and then really start to make something happen.
Yeah, I think that the 4-lane, it's not actually 64. It's to bring from Monroe County and the Metro East right where 255 is, or the interstate that goes all the way around St. Louis, to connect that to Murfreesboro and then all the way to Carbondale.
Yeah.
So you go from, you know, 2 lanes, and it's kind of a little bit all over the place, thank you, to a 4-lane highway on existing roads. There's existing paths there, and all along those 4-lane, the potential area for the 4-lane highway to connect the St. Louis area quicker to Carbondale. There are other economic opportunities, not just for the university, but there's other communities there that could use economic growth, and that'd be one way to spur that type of economic growth. Yeah, yeah, right, yeah.
Amtrak subsidies, that's one place.
You know how long it takes to get by Amtrak from St. Louis to here? 10 hours.
Chicago to here.
No, there's a route. No, not Chicago.
But I'm saying that's why we need the subsidies to
It's
continue.
quicker to get from Chicago to here than it is St. Louis to here by Amtrak.
Well, but we can't get anywhere if the Amtrak isn't sustained. I mean, there won't ever be a train from directly from there.
How about the expansion of Amtrak and in conjunction with the new port project? I mean, isn't that a part of a project? The port project, bringing in the new port in Cairo? Yeah. And then
Well, I think
expanding the Amtrak
that's up to
for fossil
Chicago.
fuel,
Sure, that's up to Chicago. But I'm not sure at this point. There are lines between St. Louis and Carbondale, but they're used for freight. They're not used for transit. There's a lot of different lines.
I heard that they were extending that down as part of the port project in Cairo.
But it won't be for people.
No, it's for fossil fuel.
Right. It won't be for people. And so if you're a student that's looking for quick transportation to, you know, a major airport because you want to go on spring break, you know, that's a problem. And the fact that we are not that this part of the district is not better connected to the wider world is definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
Not just in terms of transportation, but also in terms of there's huge parts of Southern Illinois that don't have adequate access to high-speed internet. There's places, and that's not necessarily an issue in Carbondale, the university in particular. There are some places where in the city it's actually still difficult because you only have one service provider. That's called a monopoly, which is supposed to be illegal, but it's apparently the status quo here. So,
Sorry to interrupt, we have 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Yep.
Can I get someone else? Sorry. Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
With all of the discussion about the transportation and et cetera,
there was a gentleman that spoke, from Cuba that, talked about how much they import produce, food, to feed their residents. And with the embargo, it is making it a little bit difficult to get food to their people. They have some infrastructure issues, with, they can't obviously, get farming equipment or whatever. Well, that's a big boom for farmers in this area, and of course, across the states where there's farmland. So what are you working on? It speaks to the internet issues. Farmers need to be able to have access to internet and Wi-Fi. Hey, we need to be able to talk to, grocers or people that are moving their particular products. They have a tendency to have children that don't necessarily go to other states to go to school. They stay close to home because if they're working a family business. So all of that just kind of, goes away. I mean, it's all fine and dandy with the steel and all of this and jobs this, jobs that. But then agribusiness used to be a big topic. There used to be grants available for that. So all that said, where that still rolls back to education, to jobs, to transportation, to
I talked to a lot of farmers, and what they'll tell you is that farming is always hard. It's never easy. But what's going on in the country now is just making it harder for them. And they're kind of holding their breath a little bit on this issue with China and how it's impacting and prices, and they haven't quite changed their mind about things, but they are holding their breath about how that's going to impact them. But to me, we have a broader issue with trade that we have some major problems with that, and we could spend a whole hour just talking about that. But let me not focus on that too much. But there is absolutely no excuse for the fact that we still don't have a farm bill. They control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House, and there's still no farm bill. And the farm bill is not just important for farmers just for the fact that they need that crop support in case they're in a rough spot. But it's also important for conservation efforts, the conservation dollars that are there, and for the rural education dollars that are there. And I also hear from farmers a lot, they're very concerned about how they're gonna get the goods to market if our infrastructure keeps falling apart. The roads are tearing up their equipment. They're also worried about our water infrastructure. That's how they get the goods to market. And there's opportunities, you talked about Cairo, to be able to get those goods to market. And we have 3 different navigable waterways. We got the Kaskaskia, we got the Ohio, we got the Mississippi. Those are all tremendous assets. And developing those things are not in competition with each other because they serve different parts of the Mississippi watershed. But we have not put those hard dollars that we need to put into infrastructure. And they talk about it a lot, but again, they control everything, and they still haven't done a damn thing about it. So I believe we have to have hard investment, hard dollars invested in our infrastructure, in our roads, and our bridges, like the 4-lane highway. The infrastructure bill, and I honestly think this is an area where maybe the current president, you could actually get something done. I don't think he really cares one way or the other. If he wants to come here and have the Trump water tower and the Trump bridge and the Trump highway, fine, whatever. As long as we're putting people to work. As long as we're putting people to work. We gotta do the right thing.
Would you please answer my question? I raised my hand earlier. I have one question that you diverted the question.
Okay.
I have kind of a burning issue. I missed the May 1st meeting you had regarding cannabis here in the state of Illinois.
Sure.
And you seem to be on the fence from what I read. I didn't have the opportunity to attend that.
Okay.
I'm disabled. I require it. I don't have it. I couldn't afford it if I could get it. I'm disabled, Social Security, $900 a month. The cost, the irony behind medical marijuana, of course, it's not state subsidized. We got federal issues, but it can generate a great deal of money for downstate and tourism.
Sure. Yeah, great.
We're at the bottom. We're 50 on taxes, but we're 3rd in the nation for medical cannabis accessibility. So it's kind of an issue that candidates don't like to address. But it's pretty wide ranging, and there's.
I'm happy to address it.
There's plenty of science out there, and thank you for answering.
Yes, I'm happy to. I look, as someone who's had a lot of experience with the issue from the perspective of criminal justice. I will tell you, I've come a long way on what my thinking is about it. And there's a few reasons that I've come a long way. I've seen, my wife, who's an oncology nurse, has to deal with people who have very serious symptoms, and they're dealing with very serious pain. And the fact that we just have this one blunt instrument of these terrible opioids that are, they're appropriately used for some people that are in serious pain, but they can also feed a cycle of addiction, and we know how that plays itself out eventually, and we know what it's done to devastate the country, and we know that the big pharmaceutical companies are making a hell of a lot of money off of it, and we know that they've still not been held to account, and we also know that my opponent took a lot of money from them, and they're going to do everything they can to try to get him reelected because he's not willing to hold them accountable. But that is something that has impacted my view on this particular issue. And the fact that the American Legion, which is the largest veterans organization in the United States, which I am a member of, they voted at their national convention. It's a pretty conservative group, okay? At their national convention, they voted to ask Congress to take cannabis off of Schedule I. Yeah. It has to be taken off of Schedule I. I make my decisions based on the evidence as a prosecutor.
May I add one thing, that the AMA made a decision in 2018, as conservative as they are, that they must mention to patients if their maladies warrant any sort of opioid prescribing, that they offer cannabis as an alternative.
And I totally agree with that.
We need to catch up.
I agree with that.
Going to this state in so many ways.
I think if the federal policy decision, the federal policy question, which a member of Congress has to deal with, is the issue of whether you take it off Schedule I. If you take it off Schedule I, then you allow for the research, you allow for the investments, you change the baking regulations so people can put the money into the research that needs to be done, as well as the infrastructure, which will help so many people here in Southern Illinois. The ripple effects of it are all mostly positive. And so I think that it's time. It's time. It's time for us to change our federal policy when that comes, because it's smart and it's also compassionate, but I think it's also just. Yes, sir.
One more question, last question.
Yeah.
Okay, my name's Keith. I'm here with my wife, Marcia. I just want to say I appreciate your leadership style.
Thank you.
You came in here tonight. You asked us questions. You were willing to listen to what we had to say. I'm a lifetime Democrat. I've been pretty disenchanted. I've been tempted to go independent.
Sure.
I go a lot. Right person comes along, I'll vote independent, because I feel like the Democratic Party doesn't always listen to its base. Okay. I feel like they dictate to us what they want us to hear and everything. They have a lot to learn from you. I appreciate what you've done, the way
you Was there something else?
No.
Oh, wow.
Is
it on a high note? Yes, sir.
I want to compliment you on the debate the other night, and especially on your closing. You set him up so well with that closing, where you ask him, why didn't you name any of your constituents? And you had been naming them all along. Now, you were fortunate because in the draw, you got to go last in the closing. And that worked out very well for you. But it was a great setup.
Thank you. Hey, I didn't have to set him up. He set himself up. He didn't talk about people. He talked about people. He talked about all these.
You talking about Madigan?
He talked about all these politicians.
And Nancy Pelosi.
One last one.
Okay, what can this group do to elect you?
We need volunteers. Oh, Emily.
Talk to all over.
Yeah.
I've got cider sheets.
Here we go. Okay.
Finalists, okay, yeah, leave.
That's what you need to do. We do need people to knock on doors. We need people to canvass. We need people to make calls. We have an office in Carterville. There's a Democratic headquarters in Carbondale. But the big thing this Saturday is this. I know you may have heard someone that's coming to visit. Okay? But this Saturday, we need people to not go out and protest. We need you to show up and work. We need you to vote. We need you to show up and knock on doors, make calls, go out and talk to our fellow Americans here in Southern Illinois, and get them to vote. Get them to vote. So we have many opportunities for you to be able to do that. We have plenty of shifts available. We do have so many volunteers, but we always can use more. And this is the only way you do it. The other side, they're always gonna have, the billionaires trying to bail them out, okay? The only way you can overcome that is with people power. And that's, if there's anything I leave you with tonight, is that I hope you understand this election will not be about me or any congressman or any governor or any president. This election is gonna be about your power.
Yes.
Your power as people. So use your power. Use your power. Grab it, get out there and work hard. Thank you guys for coming tonight.